When I got pregnant, my family threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. I was a disgrace, they said. A stain on their perfect family image. They buried me, figuring I'd just disappear. What they never imagined was that years later, with their entire estate on the line, the secret buyer holding their future in her hands would be me. Before all this, my world was a gilded cage called Blackwood Manor. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. A huge testament to generations of Harrington wealth. Its stone walls held more secrets than history. To the outside world, we were perfect. My father, Richard Harrington, was a titan of industry. His portrait hung in boardrooms, and his name was whispered with a mix of respect and fear. He saw the world in profits and losses. Emotion was a liability he'd written off long ago. My mother, Eleonora, was the architect of our family's public face. She was a woman sculpted from ice, her beauty as sharp as her ambition. She managed our lives like a museum exhibit, making sure every charity gala, every public smile was flawless. Her motto was simple: reputation is the only currency that matters. To her, love was a deal, and loyalty was just a tool to stay in control. Then there was my sister, Serafina. She was my mother's masterpiece. 2 years older and everything I wasn't, poised, ruthless, and perfectly in sync with the family's goals. She moved through our world like a shark, her smile a beautiful weapon she used with expert skill. While I was lost in books and paint, dreaming of a world outside our manicured hedges, Serafina was studying our father's ledgers. She was the heir, and I was just the quiet, artistic daughter, the soft contrast to their steel. They didn't hate me back then. They just managed me. I was another piece on the board. My art was a charming hobby, my quiet nature a testament to the family's well-roundedness. I was dressed in designer clothes, sent to the best schools, and taught how to behave, all while feeling like a ghost in my own life. I loved them, or maybe I just loved the idea of the family I wanted us to be. I'd see these little flickers of warmth in my father, or a shadow of softness in my mother's eyes, and I clung to them. I believed that under all the money and expectations, there was a real family. It was a foolish, youthful hope. The cage was beautiful, and I was about to hand them the key to lock me inside forever. My rebellion wasn't some grand protest. It was quiet. It was Liam. He was a poet and musician who saw the world in rhythm and color, not dollar signs. I met him in a dusty city library, my escape when Blackwood Manor felt too sterile. He didn't know I was a Harrington. To him, I was just Alara, the girl with paint under her nails and a longing in her eyes. With him, I felt real for the first time. The laughter wasn't fake, the conversations weren't scripted. His touch was worth more than all my mother's diamonds. He saw me, not the heiress. Our love was a secret garden, hidden from the frozen world of my family. It was reckless, I knew that. Liam, with his worn-out boots and portfolio of dreams, was the opposite of everything the Harringtons stood for. But I was in love, and love makes you believe you can work miracles. Then 2 pink lines on a plastic stick. I was pregnant. First came the fear, a cold dread that wrapped around everything. But it was followed by a fierce, protective love for the life inside me. And with that love came a sliver of hope. A child. A grandchild. This had to change things, right? Surely this would melt the ice and make them see that life was more important than legacy. I told Liam first. I saw the fear in his eyes, but he held me and promised we'd face it together. He was ready to walk into the lion's den with me. I planned to tell my parents calmly, to present it as a new chapter, not a crisis. I imagined their shock turning into reluctant acceptance, maybe even joy. I built this whole fantasy of forgiveness, a fragile dream that was about to be smashed to pieces. I was so sure love would win. I never considered that for the Harringtons. Love was never part of the equation. I decided to tell them in the grand library, the heart of Blackwood Manor. It was a room for pronouncements, not conversations. My father stood by the cold fireplace, my mother sat on an armchair like a queen, and Serafina leaned against a bookshelf, a smirk already on her face. She could smell the drama. My voice shook. I'm pregnant. Silence, not shock, but a heavy, calculating silence. The kind before a verdict. My father's face turned to stone. My mother's expression didn't change, but I saw something cold and triumphant in her eyes. It was Serafina who spoke first, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Oh, Alara," she sighed, Always so dramatic, and who's the father? Let me guess. The penniless artist? How predictable. She turned to our parents. She did this on purpose to embarrass us. It's a pathetic attempt to get attention. Her words were poison. My father's jaw tightened. Is this true, Alara? You would bring this complication into our family with a man of no standing. His name is Liam, I whispered. We love each other. I hoped you'd be happy. My mother laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor. Happy? You thought we would be happy? You, pregnant out of wedlock with the child of a commoner. You haven't just embarrassed us, Alara. You've declared war on this family's legacy. You're a liability, a stain that has to be scrubbed out. Her words were so clinical they stole my breath. This wasn't a family discussion. It was damage control. I looked at my father, begging him with my eyes to step in. He just shook his head. Eleonora is right, he said, his voice final. The Harrington name is built on strength and a flawless image. This is unacceptable. So what are you saying? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mother delivered the sentence. She stood and walked toward me but didn't touch me. You will leave. Tonight. You'll take nothing but the clothes on your back. You won't contact us. You won't use our name. As far as we're concerned, you'll cease to exist. We'll tell everyone you're studying abroad indefinitely. As of this moment, Alara, you are nothing to us. It was absolute. No appeal, no mercy. I was being erased. I looked at Serafina, who was watching with a smug look of victory. I looked at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. And I looked at my mother, the woman who gave me life, now casting me out without a second thought. As a security guard I'd known since I was a kid escorted me out, she leaned in and whispered, We buried our daughter today. I suggest you learn to stay dead. The great iron gates of the estate, the ones I'd passed through 1,000 times, slammed shut behind me. That clang was the sound of my life ending. I stood on the cold pavement, with nothing but my clothes and the tiny secret life inside me, completely alone. They hadn't just thrown me out. They'd buried me alive. The world outside Blackwood Manor was harsh. The first few weeks were a blur of cheap motels and hunger. I tried to find Liam, but his apartment was empty. A neighbor said he'd left, talking about pressure he couldn't handle. Whether he ran or my family made him, I'll never know. The result was the same. I was on my own. The city I once knew became a concrete jungle. I sold the designer coat off my back just to eat. I learned to sleep with one eye open in shelters, my hand on my growing belly. The pregnancy, my little secret hope, was now a terrifying vulnerability. I found work scrubbing floors and washing dishes, my hands raw, my body aching. I was invisible. I, Alara Harrington, who grew up with servants, was now the one no one saw, scrubbing away the messes of other people's comfortable lives. Winter was brutal. I found a tiny room above a laundromat, the constant rumble of machines my only company. It was there my daughter, Aurora, was born. Holding her was like feeling the sun for the first time. She was perfect, and she was mine. Looking at her face, I knew I couldn't just survive. I had to fight. But the fight was hard. Some days I ate only bread so Aurora could have milk. I battled sickness, loneliness, and a despair so deep it felt like drowning. I hit rock bottom on a rainy Tuesday. An eviction notice was taped to my door. Aurora had a fever, and I had $4 to my name. I just sat on the floor and broke. I wept for the girl I was, the love I'd lost, and the family that threw me away. I cried until there was nothing left but a hollow emptiness. It was in that emptiness that the first spark ignited. A week later, I was walking past a newsstand, shielding Aurora from the wind, and there they were. My family, on the cover of a business magazine. The headline read, "The Harrington Dynasty, a legacy of integrity and family values." There was a photo of them in the library. My father, the benevolent patriarch. My mother, the picture of grace. And Serafina, smiling like she owned the world. The article was nauseating. My mother quoted about the importance of unconditional family bonds. My father talking about moral fortitude. Serafina even mentioned her beloved sister, pursuing her artistic passions abroad. A neat little lie to tie up the loose end that was me. They were thriving. They'd erased me and replaced my memory with a convenient story. They were celebrating family values on a throne built from my suffering. Something inside me snapped. The grief didn't disappear, it crystallized. It hardened from a soft ache into something sharp, cold, and diamond-hard. It became rage. That night, in my tiny room, I looked at my reflection in the cracked window. The broken girl was gone. In her place was a woman with a terrifying clarity in her eyes. They had buried me. They'd celebrated my funeral and toasted their good fortune. They thought I'd rot in the grave they dug. I made a vow to myself in the darkness. It wasn't enough to survive anymore. I would build an empire. I would gather power, not for its own sake, but as a weapon. I would patiently and silently become the instrument of their ruin. They buried me with nothing, so I would return and take everything. The years passed. The Harringtons shone in the public eye, totally oblivious to the ghost they'd created. But that ghost was busy. I shed the name Alara Harrington like old skin. I became Cassandra Evans, a name with no history, a blank slate. I moved to a new city. My first business was tiny. With a small loan, I started reselling vintage clothes from my kitchen table, working late into the night after Aurora was asleep. But I had a secret weapon, their education. All those lessons in economics and art history they'd forced on me were now my tools. I had an eye for value and a desperation that made me outwork everyone. That small business grew. I reinvested every penny. I taught myself to code, to analyze markets, to understand shell corporations, the very games my father played. My charming hobby, art, became my entry. I started investing in undervalued artists, predicting trends with uncanny accuracy. I was ruthless and disciplined. My entire life was a long, slow chess game against an opponent who didn't even know they were playing. Aurora was my light. I shielded her from the darkness of my mission. To her, I was just Mom. She would never know the cold, calculating world her mother entered after she went to sleep. Over 15 years, Cassandra Evans became a whisper in exclusive financial circles, a mysterious investor with a Midas touch. I built a fortune in sustainable tech, a field my father had laughed at. I built a corporate labyrinth that made my wealth untraceable. I was a ghost in the machine, pulling levers from the shadows. I read every article about my family, studied their every move, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The moment came. The Harrington Empire, once a fortress, was crumbling. My father's old-school tactics didn't work anymore. Serafina, running day-to-day operations, was reckless, favoring flashy, high-risk ventures that bled money. Their pride was their downfall. They were over-leveraged and desperate. Their last move was to quietly put Blackwood Manor on the market, a private sale to avoid admitting failure. To them, selling the estate was like selling their crown. To me, it was the key. My offer came through a Swiss law firm for an anonymous client. It was impossibly high, an offer they couldn't refuse. They were so blinded by the money they never bothered to look too closely at who was buying. They had no idea they were handing the keys to their kingdom over to the ghost they'd banished. The day the sale closed was the quietest victory of my life. I sat in my office, the deed to Blackwood Manor on my desk. I was the owner of the very ground they walked on, the master of the house where I was once told I didn't belong. Every meal they ate, every night they slept under that roof was by my permission. They were tenants in their own lives, and the rent was about to come due. My first move wasn't eviction. That was too easy. I wanted a slow, meticulous deconstruction of their lives. I started with the staff. Through my lawyers, I gave them all huge raises and bonuses, securing their loyalty. Then, the requests began. The new owner requires a full inventory of the wine cellar. The new owner requires all business documents from the study be digitized and sent to her legal team, all under the guise of an eccentric, anonymous billionaire. They grumbled, but they complied. The documents were a goldmine. Decades of my father's secret ledgers and hidden partnerships. He was a meticulous record keeper, a fact I now used against him. I found proof of illegal offshore accounts used to dodge taxes. A ticking time bomb. An anonymous, encrypted email from a concerned citizen was all it took to tip off financial regulators. Within weeks, the Harrington Corporation was under federal investigation. Assets were frozen. My father, the untouchable titan, was hiring criminal defense lawyers. The media went into a frenzy. I watched news clips of him looking old and frail, cornered by reporters. For a second, I felt a pang of something, but I crushed it. This wasn't personal. It was business. His own words turned back on him. With my father tied up in legal battles, I turned to Serafina. Her weakness was her vanity. I knew she was having an affair with an executive from a rival company, Julian Vance. She thought it was a power play. In reality, he was playing her. I used my network to get to Julian, not in person but financially. An anonymous investment here, a generous gift there, and he was in my debt. Then I made my request. At the Harringtons' annual charity gala, my mother's prized event, my plan unfolded. Just as Serafina was playing the role of the steadfast daughter, an anonymous email hit the inbox of every gossip columnist in the room. It contained photos, undeniable proof of her affair. But there was a twist. I'd also fabricated documents, emails, and financial records, making it look like Serafina was selling company secrets to her lover. It was a lie, but a believable one. It fit her character perfectly. The scandal erupted on the spot. I watched on a live feed as my father, his face pale with fury, confronted her. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a business catastrophe. The sister who had gleefully watched me get cast out was now facing her own public execution. Finally, I went after my mother. I had the staff search the attic, where they found a locked trunk. Inside were letters and photos detailing a passionate affair my mother had in the early years of her marriage, with a man she was forced to give up to marry my father for his money. The most damning part was a letter where she confessed she'd always resented my father for it. I didn't leak this. That was too crude. Instead, I had the letters placed on my father's desk in the library, right where he'd find them after the disastrous gala. I wanted to break them from the inside. Their financial ruin was one thing, the public disgrace was another, but destroying their trust in each other, that was the masterpiece. Section 10. The final confrontation. The end came quickly. The company was crippled. Serafina was fired. The affair shattered my parents' marriage. They were bankrupt financially, socially, and morally. The only thing left was Blackwood Manor, and they were about to learn it wasn't theirs anymore. I summoned them to the estate. The new owner wished to meet them. They had no choice. I waited in the library, the same room where they had dismantled my life. I stood by a roaring fire, not the cold, dead hearth of my memory. I heard them enter Richard, Eleonora, and Serafina, 3 broken people. They looked around, expecting some foreign tycoon. They only saw me. For a long moment, there was just the crackling fire. I saw confusion, then disbelief. "Ilara," Serafina whispered. "Hello, Serafina," I said, my voice even. My father staggered back. "It can't be. You're supposed to be." "Dead," I finished. "Buried. That was the plan, wasn't it? You taught me that power is the only thing that matters. You were my greatest teachers." My mother's icy composure finally cracked. You did this to us. The investigation, the scandal, you ruined us." "Ruin is a strong word, Mother," I said, taking a step toward them. "I prefer to think of it as a market correction. Let's review the ledger. You," I said to my father, "valued your reputation more than your daughter. Now your reputation is ash." I turned to my sister. "And you, Serafina, you built your life on my absence. You framed my pregnancy as a malicious act. I just returned the favor, framing you with a lie that was easy for everyone to believe." Finally, I faced my mother. "And you called me a stain to be scrubbed clean. You buried me with nothing." I paused. "So I learned how to take everything." They just stared, their rage impotent. And in that moment, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not joy, just a quiet, hollow emptiness. The fire I'd tended for 15 years had burned itself out. "This house is mine now," I said softly. "Your cars are waiting. You will take nothing with you but the clothes you are wearing. Consider it a lesson in family values." They left without another word. I never saw them again. For weeks, I walked the silent halls of Blackwood Manor. The victory felt hollow. I realized I hadn't destroyed them for satisfaction. I'd done it to prove to the scared, pregnant girl I once was that she was not nothing. But the house was still full of their ghosts, so I decided to perform one last exorcism. I didn't sell it. I established the Aurora Foundation, named for my daughter, my guiding light. Blackwood Manor, once a monument to cold ambition, was transformed. The ballroom became a gallery for undiscovered artists. The East Wing became a shelter for single mothers, for women cast out just like I was. The library, the room of my judgment, became a place of learning and hope. I didn't burn their world down for revenge. I tore it down to build something better from the rubble. My vengeance wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. They buried me, yes, but they forgot that some seeds need to be buried before they can grow. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments, do you think revenge was the right path? I read all your thoughts. Thanks for listening.